In today's episode, we'll be discussing how to align your body's natural circadian rhythm to improve your overall fertility. Welcome to the Finally Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, the podcast helping women identify the real reasons you haven't conceived or stayed pregnant so you and your partner can finally grow the family of your dreams. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Wood. Let's dive in, shall we? In this episode, you'll discover what a circadian rhythm is and why it's important for fertility and PCOS, what disrupts your circadian rhythm, and how to start supporting your circadian rhythm for optimal fertility today. Plus, 3 actionable steps for you to cultivate foundations to support your fertility. I'll be talking with Jillian Greaves, a functional dietitian and women's health specialist and owner of the private practice Jillian Greaves Functional Nutrition and Wellness. Jillian provides comprehensive nutrition and lifestyle counseling to women with a special emphasis on PCOS, hormone balance, and digestive health. So welcome, Jillian. I'm really excited for today's topic. I don't think that I've ever done a deep dive into the circadian rhythm on the podcast yet. And I was just having a conversation with one of my clients about if you did this for your fertility, you would see so much change, like in your hormones and so many different things. So really excited to have you here to talk about this.
So excited and so excited. I'm the first to dive into this. I feel like it's a super important topic that really does get overlooked.
Yeah, because I think it just seems too simple and it doesn't cost anything. And yeah, it's just one of those habits that I think can be really hard to break. I can be guilty of not having optimal habits to support my circadian rhythm. But I think when you have that background knowledge and information about why it's important and the changes you can see, then it makes it a little bit easier to stick with.
Totally. And we like to overcomplicate things, right? And to your point, it can't be that simple. And the habits that support and optimize circadian rhythms can be simple, and the impact is really huge, which is amazing.
Absolutely. So for anyone who's listening, maybe they've heard the word circadian rhythm, but they don't entirely understand what that is and what that means. So I'd love to have you define that for everyone.
Yeah. So circadian rhythms, for anyone who is not familiar, circadian rhythms are physical, mental, and behavioral changes that follow roughly a 24-hour cycle. Circadian rhythms work by helping to make sure that internal processes are happening in the right place and at the right time. At the end of the day, circadian rhythms are basically making sure that all of our internal processes are operating as they should. Circadian rhythms are regulated by a master clock, as we refer to it in the brain. So we have a master clock, which is I'll butcher this name, but the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN, that's found in the hypothalamus. So this is our master clock. And we have peripheral clocks that are found all throughout our body, in our tissues, on our organs. And essentially, the master clock in the brain is going to receive information from our outside world, our environment, and it's going to communicate or send signals to all the other clocks throughout the body. And this is going to stimulate the production of hormones and neurotransmitters and really have a ripple effect on all of our internal processes, again, happening in the right place and at the right time. I think when a lot of people hear the word circadian rhythms, they think about our sleep-wake cycle, right? Which is regulated by circadian rhythms. But I think what's not talked about enough is the fact that we are very much circadian beings by nature, and our thyroid function, our sex hormones and reproductive function, our digestive function, our immune function, our mood and mental health, all of these things in our body are regulated and entrained by circadian rhythms.
What a beautiful explanation. Thank you for going a little bit deeper, like you said, because I think a lot of times it is just surface level, oh, the sleep wake cycle. But no, I think there's really like a much bigger picture underneath that label that we can give it. So, why is this important for fertility and maybe someone who is struggling with PCOS on their journey?
Yeah, great question. Ultimately, the alignment of our circadian rhythms, again, from a fertility perspective, regulates essentially the release of important reproductive hormones. And specifically, our circadian rhythms are going to regulate hormones like our gonadotropin releasing hormone, our LH, our luteinizing hormone, our FSH, our follicle stimulating hormone. So these are key hormones that kind of regulate and govern essentially the menstrual cycle and play a really key role with supporting follicle maturation and ovulation and the production of our sex hormones. So if circadian rhythms are disrupted, this can lead to abnormalities with our menstrual cycle. So if we're not ovulating regularly, this is, of course, going to impact our chances of conception. With circadian rhythms regulating our immune function and playing a big role with our inflammatory levels in the body, if our circadian rhythms are disrupted, this can have a negative impact on things like egg quality, which is really key and important for fertility. When it comes to PCOS in particular, we know that our metabolic health is heavily influenced by circadian rhythms. So when circadian rhythms are disrupted, this is associated with higher levels of insulin or more severe insulin resistance and blood sugar issues. It's associated with higher levels of androgen hormones being hormones that are often elevated in women with PCOS. So these can be really exacerbated or amplified by circadian rhythm disruption. Disruption to circadian rhythms, just to give you even a couple more specific examples, this can alter the secretion of the hormone melatonin. Melatonin, again, is a hormone we think about mostly in relation to sleep, but actually plays a really important role when it comes to our fertility. Just to, again, give you some examples there where circadian rhythms, and specifically if the habits that support circadian rhythms are disrupted, it has this ripple effect or this snowball effect where we can see negative implications for our fertility and for our PCOS symptoms specifically.
Just listening to what you had to share there, like, it is so important to work on at least moving towards the best that you can to support your circadian rhythm and your sleep and all of that. So obviously, life happens, right? I like to be somewhat on the realistic side of things. What are some things that could disrupt someone's sleep? And maybe they're things that they know, right? I feel like we all know we should turn our screens off an hour before bed, but maybe there's even some things hidden in there that we don't realize is
Yeah.
disrupting our sleep. So hit me with all of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would break it down first by mentioning that there's a lot of things that influence our circadian rhythms or influence that master clock in the brain. The three biggest that I really like to hone in on with clients are light and dark exposure or light regulation, our sleep schedule, so sleep timing, and then also when we eat, so meal timing. So thinking about these three big categories and how they influence circadian rhythms, let's first talk about light and dark exposure. So light and dark exposure has a significant impact on circadian rhythms because we're either seeing dark or we're absorbing light into our eyes, and this is stimulating that master clock in the brain. In our modern world, a lot of us wake up in the morning and we're on screens right away, right? We're checking our computer, we're checking our phone, we throw the TV on. So there's a lot of blue light exposure and less natural sunlight exposure. A lot of us may work on computers or work desk jobs and we're indoors all day, exposed to artificial light and fluorescent lighting. And then in the evening, when typically, in terms of thinking about our circadian nature, when it would be getting dark out, we're putting on those bright head over lights. We're looking at our phones, our tablets, our computers, our TVs. And at the end of the day, this is the way I like to describe it is it's essentially confusing for the brain. So in a perfect world, and again, we're never looking for perfection here. I'm all about realistic nutrition and lifestyle habits. But in a perfect world, we would get light exposure in the morning, that natural sunlight being a really important stimulus for supporting our circadian rhythm. We'd get some natural sunlight during the day. And then in the evening, when the sun went down, we would be in a darker, more dim environment. Not really exactly how we're operating in our modern world. To take a really very realistic approach here, one big thing I do like to encourage women to consider is how can we maybe get some exposure to sunlight in the morning? Maybe it's not immediately after we wake up, but maybe it's within the first 60 to 90 minutes or sometime before 10 a.m. Do we have the ability to pop outside and go for a quick walk? Could we stand on our porch or in the backyard and just absorb a little bit of that sunlight? Maybe we could sit near a sunny window and absorb some of that into our eyes. If we wake up at a time where it's pitch black out, maybe we grab an inexpensive, like full spectrum light therapy lamp that we can pop on when our alarm goes off, and we can sit there, hang out, and put that in front of us to stimulate the sun and to train our circadian rhythms. During the day, if we tend to be inside more so, maybe we can eat our lunch outside, or again, eat near a sunny window, or pop outside for a quick walk after we eat lunch to get a little bit of that natural sunlight exposure. In the evening, typically some of my recommendations are to consider if there might be a way for us to turn off like the big bright overhead lights when the sun goes down. Maybe we have some dimmers on our light switches, or maybe we put on some table lamps or floor lamps. And if we really need to be on screens in the evening, ideally, I love for clients to create some space in the evening off of screens, if possible, even 30 minutes, 60 minutes being even better. But maybe that's not possible for us, in which case maybe we could grab a pair of amber blue light blocking glasses that filter out 100% of blue light. We pop those on in the evening, which can help to filter out some of that blue light. And to emphasize why that's important, when the body's kind of seeing all of this bright light, it's actually going to suppress melatonin production, which can disrupt our sleep-wake cycle in terms of sleep onset, sleep quality, and it can also increase the expression of the hormone cortisol when we want to see cortisol declining in the evening. So by throwing on a pair of blue light blockers, we can filter some of that out and support our body's natural rhythms. So light and dark exposure, if you're new to circadian rhythms, that is probably the place I would start first and foremost. And you don't have to do all of those things. Maybe choose one. Start with the light exposure in the morning and create some habits there to see what works for you before moving on to other strategies.
Absolutely. I'm in New York and it's been raining for more days than that in the month of May. And today is finally sunny. So we got outside, ate breakfast, and did so many things, my daughter and I. And it was so nice to just get that sunlight,
Love that.
because getting even near a window or going outside when it's gray out is still important, but having that sunlight is just so energizing and invigorating when you haven't
Totally.
seen it for days.
Oh my gosh, totally. And you feel the difference, right?
Yeah.
But I think to your point, even if it's cloudy or drizzly, you're still going to reap the benefits of popping outside, even if you can only get outside for a short amount of time. And I will say, just based on my experience working with women over the years, the morning light exposure in particular, if we can find a way to consistently get some exposure, whether it be by the window, outside, using a sun lamp, or a combination of all three, it makes a really notable difference with how women feel in terms of mood, energy levels, digestion. So we can notice some immediate benefits there, but definitely from a fertility perspective and thinking about PCOS symptoms as well, this morning light can be a really key anchor.
And I think that, like you said, just pick one change to start with, and they're pretty simple. Getting outside for a few minutes or sitting near a window where you can. And you mentioned two other things. So I know eating, like your eating
Yes.
schedule, and you mentioned something else as well.
Sleep schedule was the other one. And
Yes.
so in terms of the sleep schedule, this is going to look different for everyone based on a lot of variables and what's going on in your life. So we always need to think about your context and what makes the most sense. But ultimately, I like to recommend aiming for some type of consistency with your wake up time and keeping the variability of your wake up time to a similar hour daily. And this is, again, a really key anchor for the body that can promote a lot of stability, and that consistency can really help with the processes that happen in the morning in terms of the production of hormones and neurotransmitters and things that are kickstarting our day and getting important processes rolling in the body. To give you an example of a non-consistent sleep schedule, if you're someone that has to wake up at 6 a.m. every day during the week for work, but on the weekends you sleep in until 9 or 10 a.m., It's not uncommon in these cases for come Monday morning, we feel like we got hit by a bus. We're experiencing what's often referred to as social jet lag, where the disruptions with our sleep timing are actually disturbing our circadian rhythms and making us feel tired and foggy and groggy, and maybe our digestion feels off, our mood feels off. Consistency with that wake up time, again, just keeping it to a similar hour, can be really powerful for optimizing circadian rhythms and supporting that alignment. Same thing with our bedtime. The other thing that I want to point out is that ideally, in terms of how our internal processes operate, being able to get to bed at a time that is a little bit earlier in terms of 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, maybe being an ideal time frame. If we're staying up till midnight or 1 a.m., even if we're getting 8 hours of sleep, the quality of that sleep and the kind of important repair processes that need to happen overnight are going to be impacted. This is for my night owls out there that like to stay up super late. If you're going to bed at 1 a.m. or going to bed at midnight, is there a way we could start to inch that bedtime a little bit earlier, even by 20 minutes, and then maybe by another 20 minutes, and letting the body adapt? Again, there may be factors that impact your ability to do that, which is okay. But if we're staying up late for no reason, maybe there's an opportunity to bring that bedtime a little bit earlier.
I think what's coming through is if it is out of your control in terms of going to bed super late, like midnight or 1, then maybe trying to focus on those other tips that you had shared previously, like as soon as you do wake up, get that morning sun as soon as you can, just to support your circadian rhythm in ways that you're able to, if say you work a late job or something like that.
Absolutely. And maybe you're grabbing a pair of the blue light blockers that you're wearing later in the evening so we can filter out some of that blue light and support the body in that sense. Know that it definitely does not have to be all or nothing, and any small tweak that you make for supporting circadian rhythms will pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about food and
Yes.
circadian rhythm. I feel like it's common to hear, right? Don't eat before bed and things like that. But I feel like it's for another reason, like more for your weight and not necessarily like your circadian rhythm support. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, and ultimately what you're mentioning does boil down to circadian rhythms at the end of the day. Ultimately, I'm an advocate of aligning your pattern of eating with your circadian rhythm, which would essentially mean breaking your overnight fast and having something to eat within the first hour or two of waking, and ideally eating consistent meals and snacks throughout the day, about every 3 to 5 hours throughout the day from there. And really eating food spread out throughout that daytime window, say from 7 a.m. to around 7 p.m. as just as an example, if that's what worked for your schedule. What's often happening in our modern world is we are skipping breakfast. We are delaying breakfast, right? So we're not breaking our overnight fast and we're delaying eating. What happens from there is we end up eating the bulk of our calories or energy later on in the day, in the evening. So this kind of works against our circadian nature, where in the morning, our bodies are prepped and primed for fuel. When talking about fertility and PCOS in particular, there's a lot of different information, misinformation out there, a lot of trends with things like intermittent fasting, skipping or delaying breakfast. But ultimately, for women of reproductive age in particular, we know that there are endless benefits to breaking that overnight fast, having a really well-rounded breakfast, and having that anchor our day. When women skip breakfast, there's actually data that tells us that women have higher levels of cortisol later in the afternoon. They're more prone to issues with blood pressure, experience more issues with blood sugar and insulin resistance. And this can also have negative implications from a fertility perspective in terms of our cycle regularity. But speaking specifically to circadian rhythm, when our eating kind of window shifts and we're eating all of our food later on in the day, again, it's kind of confusing for the brain because we're not giving our body fuel when it is awake and ready to go for the day, but we are eating food later at night when the body ideally wants to be winding down, finishing digesting food so it can focus on other important repair processes in the body that are really crucial. I always like to preface this by mentioning that at the end of the day, biological hunger cues always trump any external rule. If it's 30 minutes before you're going to bed and you're experiencing strong hunger signals, eat something, have a snack. The most important thing is to respond to that. If we're going to bed hungry, that's probably going to disrupt our sleep. So know that none of these things should be treated like a rigid rule. Everything we're talking about, these are tools, right? And even if we're just doing these things sometimes, that can be really beneficial. In terms of optimal circadian rhythm, kind of pattern of eating or meal timing, that's where, again, I recommend eating in the morning soon after waking, eating consistently throughout the day, and maybe we have a little bit of an earlier dinner. But what I see often, and I'm sure you see this is happening as well with clients in practice, again, is the skipping breakfast or the skimping on breakfast. Then we're running on stress hormones. We're experiencing blood sugar and energy crashes. We're getting hangry and snacky in the evening. And it's pretty amazing what just shifting the pattern of eating to support circadian rhythms more so, the impact that that can have in terms of how we feel in an immediate sense, but also the overall bigger picture with optimizing circadian rhythms and fertility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great tips and awareness on things you could be doing that could be disrupting your circadian rhythm, and then also how you can support it with better decisions and better habits as well. Let's talk about temperature in the room as well, because that can affect your sleep, like
hmm
temperature and then the level of darkness in the room. Is that something that could affect someone's sleep as well?
Totally. I love that you bring that up. And ideally, in terms of supporting circadian rhythms and also just deep, good quality restorative sleep, ideally sleeping in a cooler environment is ideal. I think the number is like 62 to 68 degrees, I think it is. I'll have to double check on that. But a cooler environment, when we're sleeping in a hotter environment, we have a harder time, again, getting that deeper, more restorative sleep and that really great recovery that we're looking for with sleep. And then in terms of the environment, ideally, we want our sleeping environment to be pitch black. And we don't want to have light coming in through the shades. We don't want devices that are plugged in that are emitting light. Ideally, we want it pitch black. The easiest solution to that in my mind is grab a sleep mask and throw that on while you're sleeping to make it really dark. And it's that contrast too that's really important for circadian rhythms where we're sleeping in that dark environment. We take our sleep mask off, we open the windows or we pop on our light box and we get that bright light exposure. So that light regulation is key.
Mhm. Great tip. Thank you. And I know you have a freebie for the listeners, a PCOS root cause driver quiz and a private podcast if you want to share about that.
Absolutely. We have a quiz, like you mentioned, that is a great starting point for assessing and understanding PCOS root causes a little bit more deeply. And ultimately, when I say root causes, I'm speaking to some of the internal dynamics or imbalances that can commonly drive the progression of PCOS and PCOS symptoms. So this quiz can help you really have a starting point for, all right, based on the symptoms I'm experiencing, what are the areas of opportunity that might need a little bit of love and support? So after you go through the quiz, you get your results and it will guide you to a private podcast based on your results where you can get more information and just some quick action steps for supporting your specific PCOS root causes.
Love that. And I feel like what can happen sometimes is people are presenting with some PCOS symptoms, but they are not officially diagnosed. And I feel like this quiz can be so helpful, like no matter what spectrum of PCOS, maybe
Yes.
PCOS you are on.
Totally. I'm so glad you brought that up. And it's so true because achieving a true PCOS diagnosis can often even be hard, right? Based on it being a diagnosis of exclusion. If you have a PCOS diagnosis, the quiz is great for you. But if you just experience PCOS like symptoms, or you've been told you might have PCOS or you suspect it, it's still going to be super helpful.
Hmm. Yeah. So go check that out. The link will be in the show notes. And I love to end all of my guest expert episodes with three simple action steps you would like to leave with the listeners.
So the three big action steps would be, and I'm echoing some of what we had already talked about, but I think to highlight the big three that I would emphasize, one, get morning light exposure some way, somehow, do it in whatever way works for you. Get that morning sunlight. Eat a well-rounded protein-rich breakfast in the morning, break your fast within the first hour or two. And in the evening, engage in a relaxing evening routine, whether it's 2 minutes long, 5 minutes long, 10 minutes long, whatever you have time for. Step away from the screens if you can and let your body relax before bed.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And I personally know how expensive fertility can be, especially when you're struggling and you've been struggling for a long time. And these are free tips, right? It doesn't cost you anything. It's not going to break the bank. So really, really make sure that you are sitting down and thinking, how can you be intentional with making these shifts? And maybe you see results or changes, positive changes right away. Maybe you have to stick with it for a little bit before you really start seeing those changes, especially maybe in your cycle. But don't give up on it, because whether it's for fertility or just general health and wellness, these are foundational things that are going to serve you for the rest of your life, and pregnancy, postpartum, all of those things. I love to take a step back and think of the big picture here. So make sure that you guys are really, really considering how you can begin doing this if you're not already doing it in your daily routine. So I would love for you to share with the listeners where they can learn more and connect with you.
Absolutely. So you can find me over on Instagram. My handle is just Jillian Greaves RD. You can also check out my website, which is just jilliangreaves.com. That's where you can learn more about working with us. We have lots of recipes, free articles, guides, and also feel free to DM me if you have any circadian rhythm questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your passion and expertise with us, Jillian.
Thank you.
Are you ready to finally discover why you haven't been able to get or stay pregnant? The Ultimate Fertility Blueprint is a quick, insightful quiz designed to reveal your overall capacity to conceive and help you discover potential root causes and areas to address to improve your fertility so you can finally get and stay pregnant. You'll find the link in the show notes. As a quick reminder and disclaimer, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Always consult your doctor or healthcare provider before starting any new supplement or protocol, especially if you're actively trying to conceive or undergoing treatment.